Well, I think they're taking the right approach and saying, let's see how the tariff situation plays out, because at least we have some dates to focus on. Well, we know Mexico either happens or not on Monday, and we're hoping that Trump and Xi meet at the end of June.
When's their meeting?
It's not, their date is not on the calendar yet, but we assume that it's going to be the end of this month with G20. So
I mean the Fed.
The Fed is in 2 weeks.
Okay.
So obviously they're not going to be able to respond prior to the Trump-Xi meeting, but that's why they're just going to sit and wait, because how that plays out could have a profound influence on the economy, and they don't want to be seen as panicking. They only have 9 rates to cut if they plan on going back to 0. In the last rate cut cycle, they had 20. So they got to be very judicious with how they utilize. Well, I don't think they should go back to 0 ever, but assuming that they will.
Should cut, right? Period.
Well, I think that the economy continues on the trajectory that we're seeing. Yeah, they should cut. I'm just against them going back to the 0 lower bound, which is one of the things that Powell talked about today.
If the economy continues on its current trajectory, you think they should cut. And what is it about that trajectory that leads you to believe that they should? Because as I understand their dual mandate, you want low inflation and near as possible to full employment. And that feels pretty much like what they've got right now.
Right. On paper, that's what we have right now. But at least the labor market part is very much a lagging indicator. So if the U.S. economy continues to slow, if we get more one handles in the next couple of quarters, then eventually in GDP, eventually that softness in the job market will begin to show up in the numbers. If you're an employer, you're not going to respond to a slowdown immediately by firing people. You'll cut some costs here and there. Shedding workers is sort of the last decision in response to a slowdown.
And Steve, that's what's interesting about this is so much of your interview and the discussion has been around the potential slowing, the potential impact of the tariffs, whether the Fed would cut as, what was the term he used, insurance or sort of a safeguard against that,
yes,
like we saw in the 90s?
Yeah, so he mentioned that back in April, and the market reacted to that. So I came back to it. He was still like, it's something we did. I'm not saying it's something we're going to do, but it was something that was in our playbook. And I think that the effects of these tariffs are so uncertain that I think the Fed doesn't want to prejudge it. I think the one thing Clarida said definitively was it's not seen as a major league inflationary event, and that's because of the way, the mechanics of how they work. You put the tariff on, prices go up 1 month. The next month, or a year later anyway, they won't be higher by the amount because there's no new tariff on there, unless it creates some broader inflationary spiral that's out there and prices rise in the economy more broadly because the sellers feel like they have an excuse to do so. That's to the side. What he seems focused on addressing are the productivity effects and the weaker growth effects, and those are where the Fed might address it. But right now, and so far, he said very definitively, only a modest effect on growth, if at all.
Right. And finally, Peter, though, he did, let's see how he said in particular, I think said inflation was at the lower end of the range that he's comfortable with. And so people are speculating about, would that be the justification? And Tyler's point about the mandate, crazy as it sounds to say, well, it's 1.4 instead of 1.8 or whatever, if that's a big deal for them.
And the Fed sort of confused it when Powell spoke a few weeks ago when he brought the Dallas Dallas Fed's trim mean PCE. A couple last week, that hit 2%, matching the highest level since 2012. So you're going to talk about the Dallas trim mean PCE being at a 7-year high, but then you're going to show this angst on PCE because some other number has trended lower.
So maybe
it's
some
very
mixed
inconsistent.
messaging
Yes.
there.